Hello to everyone. This is Developing Critical Thinkers from Childhood. Our group is formed by Juan Marulanda, Camilo Arroyave, and Yeisson Ayala. So, to begin with, we should talk about critical thinking, the history, concepts, and features. Now, with the history, in 1910, John Dewey started to talk about something called reflexive thinking, which he defined as an active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it, and the further conclusions to which it tends. Although this was called by Dewey as reflective thinking, this definition is considered as the first coined definition of critical thinking. We must have in mind the fact that by the moment Dewey said this or stated this, the concept of reflective thinking or critical thinking was not much relevant in educational field. However, in the 1930s, something called the 8-year study, which was an experiment made by several educational institutions which studied how American schools prepared their students to face higher educational life. One of the conclusions they had was that the critical thinking should be taken as an educational goal in every school in order to prepare the students for the entire life. Another more important moment for the critical thinking history was the fact that in 1956, Bloom and other shown the Bloom's taxonomy, and in that document were included several critical thinking skills such as creating, designing, constructing, judging, predicting, organizing, structuring, and so on. Also, in California, there is an annual international conference of critical thinking since 1980, and the state university system in California defined or stated that all their students should take a critical thinking course before getting graduated. Now, going into the concept, we must have in mind or we must take into account that the definition of critical thinking varies depending on the authors. However, the principal definition is the one that Dewey stated, but we have another definitions, important definitions such as Rawls' definition in 1971, which he states that critical thinking is a characteristic set of principles for assigning basic rights and duties and for determining the proper distribution of the benefits and burdens of social cooperation. Additionally, now more in the educational field, Scheffler in 1960 said that we have for education regarding critical thinking a programmatic definition, since we see the critical thinking as something practical, as a concept that or set of skills that the students should start using or should start applying not only in the classroom but in the entire life. Now, some features we can talk about Bailin and others in 1999, who stated that every educator or most of the educators have their own concept or conception of which critical thinking skill or which is a critical thinking skill and what is not a critical thinking skill, and most of their conceptions vary depending on the educator. However, that Bailin and others stated three features that can fit in most of the cases, which are the first one, that it is done for the purpose of making up one's mind about what to believe or do. The second is the person engaging in the thinking is trying to fulfill standards of adequacy and accuracy appropriate to the thinking, and finally the thinking fulfills the relevant standards to some threshold level. Finally, if you are interested on reading more about this topic, I recommend you to search in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which is supported by important institutions such as the offices of the provost, the dean of humanities and sciences, the dean of research, and the Stanford University. You can find there plenty of information and data about this topic.
The importance of critical thinking. I want to highlight about the traditional education that born from the industrial era. The education was shaped from the society needs that they had in those times. And that's why people wanted to be educated to get new opportunities in life, to get better jobs and have success in society. Now in those times, critical thinkings have been more relevant and get more importance, and most of that in the quarantine time that we have to stay at home, and that changed the way that we work, that we receive education, that changed the economy and our social life. Critical thinking skills are the tools that will allow us to adapt to the new condition. That is harder for parents because they didn't be educated and in this kind of virtual environment. So to help their children to have access to the content that teachers share us is very difficult. About the negative aspect that we have without critical thinking, we can see conspiracy theories that show us that government wants to manipulate the people because they always share the content that people see in the television, in the radio, and also the social media. That is why the critical thinking skills allow people to get and ask the correct question about what they are seeing, what are the content that they are looking for, and what they are listening. So they have to choose what is the most appropriate content for them to live. An example of this is can be the religion, which people say that God will punish you if you do this or you do that. And nowadays we can see a spiritual area that contemplate God in different way, and I think that is come from critical thinking skills that make us to ask the correct question: who is God? That is an example of what critical thinking skills can be for us. Uh, then that is related to belief, of course, and those beliefs determine the quality of our life. That critical thinking skills also contemplate emotional intelligence that allow you to avoid to stuck in a emotional problem for many years or many months. You will overcome about that in some weeks, for example. You will be more resilient, for example, in the quarantine time. That, for example, in the economy, you will look for to new opportunities on your income, and um, to have a new perspective and act different about your business. For example, you will create a new website, a profile on Instagram that allow you to share the content that you are selling and continue with your income. You will skill it on problem solving, the same that we talking before, and you will have more awareness about what is happening around you. That will also help you to help other people to get new perspective and help them in, for example, in their problem about economy, social life, or emotional intelligence.
Moving on to critical thinking in this moment, we're going to see some of the social perspective right now, and it's obviously regarding to the coronavirus. It has been known that in the United States there has been an anti-lockdown protest in which many have different beliefs regarding how true it is the fact that the coronavirus is an actual virus and not something that it is an idea that some people created. And it is partially true, as it has been known that the anti lockdown protesters have different beliefs mostly on the importance of them being free citizens and how the lockdown violates that right. Also, the United States is not the only country that is having this problem. There have been some protests going around in India and Brazil, and it has been seen that the actual needs from the people are not only this one, but regarding their jobs, as a lot of people have lost their jobs because of the lockdown. So they actually need the money so they can survive. From the critical thinking perspective is how are these people really thinking on the consequences that it is going to project on the country and on their people, their community? It is clear that the infected people on the USA has gotten to the peak around the globe, being now the country with the most infected people. And it has been seen that the peak was happening mostly when these protests have been going around. So it is clear that it is not totally invented as they were saying. So it somehow critical thinking involves how the factual information is going to impact on the others and on ourselves as a community. From the educational perspective, it is clear that the adaptation of traditional learning into teleeducation is happening everywhere, and it's just having the same classes but in our houses through a webcam. Seeing the professor, the teacher giving the exactly same class is what is happening mostly in pretty much every country. And thus there is a reinforcement on more autonomous students as they are going to be relying on themselves in this on these times. Lastly, the impact of critical thinking during these changes are going to be totally paramount. Just as my partner said before, that critical thinking skills get more relevance as they are going to be the tools that will allow to adapt easier to new life conditions, just as it is happening right now in all over the world. Now talking about the fake news, it's totally related with critical thinking, as it is known that the amount of information circulating on the internet with unreliable or no sources at all are huge. It is everywhere all over the internet with different ideas, beliefs, opinions, on pretty much every single topic that is not related to the actual virus as well. So the importance of it right now is totally regarding the quarantine and the virus, as there is a lot of people guessing, throwing information that was just said by a spokesman with no sources at all, with no further investigation. Is going to get a lot of misguided information with a lot of unreliable thoughts that are going to create a lot of problems for the community around the world. As critical thinking is totally necessary when it comes to giving a further thought and adapt on the information that is given by knowing the reliable sources and in considering which information is going to be useful or not on the people. So the critical thinking ability is going to be totally relevant for the people in this moment during the quarantine, as most of the people are only relying on the internet information that they're going to have, and a lot of them just rely on messages sent by other people that they already know and they trust, and by that is going to get an idea that is a totally reliable source or information and not given a single doubt consideration for further investigation on what is being said by them.
How can we raise critical thinkers? Those points are provided by Right to Reason, which is an institution that contemplates critical thinking skills in children. The first point, which is provide opportunities for play, allow the students to observe the world, natural phenomenon, and see the consequence of their action or action of someone else. Then we have pause and wait. Do not intervene immediately. That is, focus on the teacher or parents that give to the children the time and the space to test or interact with the world. The fourth point, which is ask open-ended question and then help children develop hypotheses, is a kind of brainstorming that will allow them to ask the question about those phenomena or the subject that they are talking about. I also wanted to add this point, which is argues critical thinking. This taken from the article of How Can We Raise Critical Thinkers, that is focused on the educational parts and show that the students have to argue about a subject and give their opinion, and this is interacting with their classmates. In this way, they can improve the social part and get new perspective about a subject or the world, and encourage critical thinking in new and different way. It encourages teachers to look for new strategies, new methodologies to implement, and maybe a change in the curriculum to get a different approach to the knowledge.